you brought up the British referendum. It's referred to as the in-out, yes-no. Are we
Right.
going to stay in the European Union? I believe you've advocated that you would support a no vote or a yes vote to get out, or a no vote that we don't want to be in anymore. We don't really know how the referendum will be worded at this point.
Well, we've got a pretty good idea, actually, because a bill went through the House of Commons 18 months ago, which laid down what the question would be, who the vote who'd be entitled to vote, and so on. It was killed off in the House of Lords by Labour and the Liberal Democrats. But it's being reintroduced. There is at least a possibility that that bill might be on the statute books by the general election. It sets out actually a very fair question: should the United Kingdom be in the European Union? I don't think you can complain about that. It's not a tendentious question either way. It also, quite importantly, confines the franchise to UK nationals. So there is not, which a lot of Euro-federalists wanted, they wanted to give the vote to EU residents living in Britain, which would, of course, hugely skewed the result. I think there is a pretty good chance of either that bill or something very like it becoming law. And if it does, although the deadline is 2017, there's no reason to think that it will actually happen in 2017. That's the last date it could be held at, and my guess is that supporters of EU membership will not want to wait for the midterm unpopularity of the government. They'll want to do this right away. Anyone who tells you definitively which way it's going to go is either deluding himself or deceiving you. Nobody knows.
Now, this would simply remove the UK from the political end of the agreement. So you'd no longer be under the Lisbon EU Constitution, etc.
Right.
You would stay in the customs union, the trade union.
I'm not sure we'd stay in the customs union. We would stay in the free market, and that may sound like a really technical distinction, but it's actually quite an important one. NAFTA is a free trade area. It doesn't operate an external tariff. So the US, while being in NAFTA, could sign a free trade agreement with Britain. But Britain, while in the European Union, could not sign a free trade agreement with the United States. And that's a huge disadvantage at the moment because, as I say, the growth is all taking place across the oceans.
Now, the critics of that position have threatened in the past, this would undo all of our economic gains, etc. Has that scare tactic been pretty much diffused, do you think?
Well, I mean, the short answer to it is look at Switzerland, right? They seem to be managing somehow. Wealthiest country in Europe, best place in the world to be born, according to the United Nations, low state spending, minimal unemployment, came through the economic crisis without a downturn, which is pretty amazing when you think that it was a banking crisis. You might have expected Switzerland to be exposed. And they are very happy with a deal where they have free trade and intergovernmental cooperation with their allies and their neighbours, but Swiss law is supreme on Swiss territory. Yet, of course, they have to meet EU standards when they sell to the EU, just as you have to meet Japanese standards when you sell to Japan, but they don't have to apply all of those standards, except in one or two specific cases, to their domestic economy. And that's a very comfortable position for them, even though they are surrounded by the EU, and even though 64% of their exports go to the EU. I have never heard anyone in Brussels suggest that we wouldn't get a Swiss-type deal if we asked for it, ever. And I've been putting the question to Anglophiles and Anglo-skeptics, Europhiles and Eurosceptics, to people of every nationality for the 15 years that I've been there. And the response you get is always the same. A general overhaul of the EU, that's not going to happen. But if you guys want some special status, some kind of associate membership, some Swiss-type deal, go for it. That's no skin off anyone else's nose. Good luck.
Now, British Prime Minister David Cameron seems to be saying that he's still trying to work for reforms that would make UK's position within the current EU acceptable. Do you see that happening?
No. It is always possible to come back with something called reform. Reform is an almost meaningless word if you think about it. It can be applied to any change of anything. He becomes less ambitious every time he talks about it, and the declared objectives that he's now committed to are so feeble, so technical and paltry, that they could be achieved without needing a new treaty, which is the ultimate proof that they haven't really changed anything. That is not on David Cameron's agenda, and it's not on the British Foreign Office's agenda, which is why it's now pretty clear that he and I will be on opposite sides when the referendum comes, and he doesn't get to decide it, and neither do I. The people do, which is right and proper. The choice we face, and I don't know how it's going to go, but the choice that my countrymen face is, are we going to be part of the European Union that we have got to know over the last 40 years? I mean, let's not con ourselves that it's going to be transformed into something else, that there's something completely different on offer. We've had a pretty good opportunity to get a feel for the thing. Do we want to remain part of it, seeing what direction it's going in, seeing that it will end up as a province of a country called Europe? Or do we want to be an independent people, trading with our friends in Europe, but rediscovering our global vocation and living under our own laws?